Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias.
You may have saw a ramble about Swiss Army knockoffs a little while ago, and you might have seen these knives sitting in the background in that video, and that's because I had actually planned on talking a little bit about Swiss Army knives and then moving into these knives, and I am going to try and get to these knives in this video. But first, I need to finish the ramble about Swiss Army knives, and that's because of something that folks who collect Swiss Army knives always say. They look at this. This is the Swiss soldier's knife. This was the replacement Swiss soldier's knife for this Swiss soldier's knife. Now, this is close to what the original one looked like. It's a little smaller and everything else, but this is the Swiss soldier's knife that was still being in use by the Swiss Army in 1944. This particular one is from 1944. You see it right there. It's actually dated 44. And this one is a Swiss soldier's knife made by Victorinox from 1999. So this is one from 1999. Now, sometime around 1957, the Swiss Army moved away from this model, the one that they were making as early as 1944, even before World War II, and continued to use a version similar to this right up until 1960. And then they went to a version with the ALOX covers on it, or ALOX scales on it. The original ones were red, and they were very similar to, what was it called? The Sturdy Boy. Now, this is not a Sturdy Boy. This is a Pioneer, but the Sturdy Boy turned into a Pioneer. And they were kind of a red ALOX instead of, the silver ALOX. And what a lot of people say, they will see the U.S. Army's demo knife or the milk knife, the MIL-K818, and they will say that it is a copy of the Swiss soldier's knife. And that is flat out wrong. The U.S. military started putting a steel cover on the outside of their knives, a stainless steel cover on the outside of their knives during World War II. And it was basically issued to the Marines in the Pacific. And we see one of those here. This is one that was actually issued to the Marines in 1944 in the Pacific Theater. You see the brass liners, the carbon steel back springs, carbon steel blades, but a stainless steel cover on them. And it was because these knives that were being used at the time also in World War II, with the bone covers and everything, were falling apart. They were not able to handle the mildew and everything and all the moisture in the Pacific. So they came out with these knives. And so it was first made for the U.S. military in 1944. And the British did something similar with this knife. This is their two-piece clasp knife. Now this one is from 1980, but the British actually started making these knives as early as 1943 or 1944 for use in the Pacific as well. And a lot of them were actually made in Hong Kong at the time, and it was for the same reason. It's because the knives that had even things like a Bakelite handle or something just were not handling combat. So they went to something more durable, and they went to a stainless steel cover on them. It was much later, 1957 or thereabouts, that the ALOX covers on the Sturdy Boy came about, and that is when the Swiss Army adopted this style of knife as the Swiss soldier's knife. Before then, they were still using these knives with a fibrous scale or a Celador scale or something like that on them. So Victorinox did not pioneer the use of a metal cover for a military knife. Also, the idea, the blades that you find on the Swiss soldier's knife, these were not unique to knives of the time when these came out in the 1890s, other knives were already using similar blades on the knife. What you might be able to say is that the Swiss Army adopted a knife before other militaries did with these particular blades, as in the your punch blade and the main blade, a screwdriver. Notice it's just a screwdriver. There is no cap lifter in there. And then, I hate to do this without trying to do it without breaking a nail, a can opener. A lot of companies, a lot of militaries did not have a can opener on their knives before 1890 because, well, they just didn't have a whole lot of cans either. That's why you also don't see a cap lifter, because there was no need for it when these were first adopted. In any case, it is believed that this pattern of knife dates all the way back to the 1860s, so it was not something unique or anything. However, you can definitely say that it was probably the Swiss Army was probably the first knife, or the first military to adopt this pattern of knife for a standard issue knife. Let's move on, because well, I think I talked enough about that. Now, this next comment is actually based off of a viewer's question, and it was about the Rough Riders Camp King knife. They came out with a Camp King knife, and this has been around for a while now, probably a good 4 or 5 years. And if you look closely and look at it closely, if you see the blade tip there, it looks like it might very well be higher than the knife, that, it's actually protruding a little bit, that the blade is proud. And a viewer asked me when he was looking at the video if the knife in the video had a proud main blade, could you actually catch the blade there? And I had commented that I really could not answer his question, because the knife in question I no longer owned, because I had about 3 or 4 of these Camp Kings. I have given them all away with the exception of this one, and this is one that I actually did some modifying to. Not the can opener. Can opener is fine. I ended up modifying the cap lifter here, because the cap lifter would not work properly. I could not open a bottle of beer with this cap lifter, and so I had to do some filing and everything on there. And when I did that, also on this particular knife, I actually did grind down the kick a little bit to lower the blade a bit. And the blade, as it is sitting right now, if you look at it like so, it looks like the blade is above the handle, but when you turn it to the side here, you can see that actually, no, the blade is slightly under the handle, just barely under the handle. So now, before I ground down the tip or the kick, it may have actually been proud. But that got me thinking, and I decided to look at all the other camp knives that I have from Rough Rider and a couple other places. And I picked this one up, and if you look, you could almost say the same thing with this one. Can you? You can see the tip right there. See the tip? You can kind of see it. However, if we open this, the punch open, and we drop it, it almost looks like it has a tip up until we open the other blade, the cap lifter. And then when we hold it flush, you can see that, no, the blade is actually down below there. However, it is just barely down below there. But whenever you look at it a little bit at the side, because you can see the blade, you would think that blade is proud. but it really isn't. See right there, it kind of looks like the blade is proud, but it really isn't. When you get it level, no, the blade is not. It is a little bit below the handle. And I actually decided, well, I'll look at some other knives, and this is another one. This is the one with the blue liners under it and black micarta. And again, you look at it here, and it definitely looks like the blade is proud. But when you turn it to the side, no, it's not. It's actually down below there. So you have the illusion of the blade being a little proud, but it really is not. And the same goes for even this knife here. This one is by Uncle Henry. And if you look at it at first glance, you go, man, that blade looks a little proud. But actually they're not. They're almost flush. They're just barely below the level. Now, if you go like that with all the blades closed, it's not going, your finger's not going to catch on it at all. But if you open up those blades like so, now you're going to have nothing to impede your hand from coming up and catching the blade. But the reason that is happening is because your hand is actually dropping. Notice your hand is actually dropping below the level there. And that's why it's actually feeling like you're catching the tip, because your finger is squishing down into that area. Now on this knife, I don't feel it because I actually dropped it a little bit. But on this knife, if I do the same thing, I will actually feel that blade a little bit, but it's not really above, it's really not sitting proud. It's just, I've got such a gap there that it's easy for me to get my finger down below there, and then I can snag it. And I can actually do that on a Great Eastern medium toothpick I have. I can actually feel the blade even though it is actually lower than the handle. So is that a flaw? Well, you can be the judge of that. It's really your call. If you want to make that a big deal, then make it a big deal. But I see that on the Uncle Henry. I've also got some old Camillus knives where the same thing happens. It happens with the Baron Son knife and everything else. It actually seems to be more part of the pattern. That is the way the knives are made, and that is the way the blade sits in the knife. It's really not proud, but it is very close to proud. And it really is not an issue, especially when all the blades are closed, because once the blades are closed, you really cannot do much with it. You see the tip is right there, but you're really not catching it. You can catch it if you try, no doubt about it, but it is really not proud. Just feels like that, or it looks like it. By now, my video on slip joints with tools on it has aired, and one of the things that I mentioned in there is that a really good tool for the slip joint is a screwdriver. To me, the screwdriver is an excellent choice for a tool on a slip joint knife. I also talked a lot about how much everyone loves the Sidebuster. And why hasn't anyone ever put a cap lifter screwdriver on a Sidebuster? I would love to see a cap lifter screwdriver on a Sidebuster. I think that would be really good. It's only 2 layers, and you end up with a main blade here. And in the case of this one has a liner lock on the main blade. Well, you can put that main blade on one side and then put the lock here for the screwdriver. I think that'd be a great idea. To have a screwdriver, a locking screwdriver on the Sidebuster frame. I think that would be something that could become very useful and very handy. And it's a knife that a lot of people really like and enjoy. And it wouldn't be a bad idea, at least in my opinion. I'd love to see somebody come out with a secondary blade on a Sidebuster that is a screwdriver. Doesn't even have to be a cap lifter, just a screwdriver. They've put screwdriver cap lifters on Barlows. They've put them on trappers. They've even put them on Stockmans. Why not put one on a Sidebuster? Now, if you follow Knife Delights, you probably saw this knife over on his channel. This is a Camco 711, and the information I'm going to say here, I actually said in a comment on Knife Delights channel, but I thought I would share it here as well, because this is one of my favorite fish knives. It's especially when it comes to these smaller ones. This one's only on a 4¼ inch frame. Typically the fish knives I collect are the ones on a 5-inch frame. This one's a little bit smaller, but it's pretty cool and it's pretty interesting. And the really interesting thing about it is this was, I think, around $1 when it first came out, back in the 1950s. It's an old pattern, and it was something that Camco was very proud of. It's the 711, got a 3 1/8 inch blade on it, but the cool thing about this one is actually the secondary blade, which is the fish scaler. And if you notice, it's got a cap lifter on there, another plus, it's got a cap lifter. But you notice the scaler on this is a little shorter than what you normally see on a fish scaler for these knives. I mean, and it could have been longer. I mean, look at it. Notice that? It could have easily been another 1/2 inch longer. You have a 3 1/8 inch main blade on here, but this blade comes in at under 2½ inches, and the scaling portion is only 1¼ inches long. What's up with that? And if you notice, the hook remover is very shallow. What's up with that? Well, Camco, when they made this knife, this is not a mistake. A lot of people see these and they think that they've been broken off and someone has put in a little cut there. No, this is the way the knife came from Camco. And this was a major selling point because they put this down as the only fish knife that had a screwdriver as well as a scaler and a cap lifter. And that's because this is, if you can tell there, it's somewhat a bit of a robust tip. And if you notice, it is slanted on both sides. You can feel it. It actually comes down, and this is actually made to be a screwdriver. So they actually made a fish knife with a screwdriver tip. This was not an accident. This is not a like, oh yeah, by the way, if you want to, you can work on you can use your hook remover tip as a screwdriver. This was intentionally made to be a screwdriver, and it is a much stiffer tip than you find on most other fish scalers. And not sure why it just didn't catch on. However, there are some fish knives, such as this one here by Saber, where they actually do take the tip of the scaler, and if you notice, they profile it so that it also gets thin at the very end there, so that you can fit it into a slotted screw and actually use it as a screwdriver. Now, they're not all that way, and some of them will be larger than that, and also depending on how wide this blade is to begin with, you may or may not want to use it as a screwdriver. But there are some that, whether it was intentional or not, it is easy to use it as a screwdriver without modification, including those on the current 4¼ inch frame fish knives that are made by Case. This one can actually be used as a screwdriver, though that is not listed among the features of the blade. And I got a feeling the reason they're concerned about that is because it is kind of thin and you could actually twist or bend the metal. So if you're loosening something like a light fixture or something, that would probably be okay. But anything that would require enormous torque, I would say don't bother with it. And quite frankly, I would have said the same thing with this one, because while this blade is definitely thicker, notice how thick the blade is compared to what we have on the Case here. See the thickness on the blade stock? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But it is definitely a thicker blade, and that is one of the reasons why you could use it as a screwdriver. And also the shorter length. So if you actually wanted to turn the blade of a, like take the scaler of a fish knife and turn it into a more functional screwdriver, you could always cut this down and then file it down, which would be kind of an interesting thing to do. Would not expect you to do that on something like a case, but maybe Case should consider doing that because I think a lot of people out there would be more interested in a screwdriver with a main blade instead of a scaler and a main blade, even on a fish knife. Any case, with that said, I will let you go. I hope you enjoyed this. No, it was a bit of a ramble, but hopefully it was an enjoyable ramble.
Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.